Hello and welcome to MusicEL Pathways, the podcast which focuses on the different pathways musicians take in order to reach their musical goals. Today we're going to be talking to another teacher here at MusicEL so you can get to know them a bit better. Our guest today is a folk fiddle maestro, who I can also call a fellow bass player. He has a vast amount of experience in a wide array of genres, having worked in rock bands, to orchestras, to folk groups, along with teaching at the Cornwall Music Service Trust. He's joined us here at MusicEL teaching the fiddle maintenance and the folk fundamental syllabus, along with his fellow musician Jamie Toms. Today we complete the set. It's MacQuarrie and Tom's set. It is Stuart MacQuarrie. How's it going, Stu?
Very good, thank you.
Awesome. So as I said at the top, we're just going to have a look at the ways in which you've developed your skills in order to reach your goals and become a professional musician. And while doing that, we're going to take some stops along the way and just have a general chat. But we're going to start all the way back at the beginning. What role did music play for you in your early years?
So I've always grown up listening to music. Dad's always played music at home. He used to go to folk clubs a lot, playing the guitar and singing. And also we had a piano at home, which he always played. So from an early age, I started playing violin when I was about 8. For some reason, there was always a violin in the house, even though nobody played it. I suppose it was maybe just sowing the seed of maybe this would be a great idea for you to do.
Do you reckon that was actually the goal? Do you reckon he put it there like, maybe? I've done the same with my daughter. I've stuck a piano. I don't play piano at all. She's got a keyboard there, you know.
Yeah, just in case.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was actually my granddad used to go to auctions a lot, and he sort of had this idea that if you could play an instrument, you could play absolutely any instrument. So I suppose that's probably where the violin originally came from, but having seen it around so much, I thought I'd like to play it. And so from about the age of 8, I started having lessons.
Do you say your dad was a musician as well?
Yeah, Dad was, he plays guitar and piano, not professionally, but he's always done it as a hobby and has enjoyed playing in folk clubs. And
but you got a kind of musical background there, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And when he was in uni, he used to teach in the prison in Plymouth.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, it was one of his little money earners, was teaching guitar to inmates in Dartmoor prison.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a pretty cool thing to do. So you started playing violin when you were 8?
Yeah.
When did you start playing bass? Because you play both, don't you?
Yeah, so I started playing bass when I went to secondary school.
Right.
And it was sort of as a result, I suppose, partly of being involved in all the different school bands, orchestras, and playing the violin in the jazz band, which was great, but it didn't, quite fit in the sort of stereotypical way that you might want it to. And I've always enjoyed that sort of really deep, rich bass sound.
Yeah.
I remember Dad used to have a ceilidh band, so playing for barn dances and things like that. And I remember sitting in the band playing the violin when I was younger, just playing in on the gig. And the one thing that really stuck with me was that sort of chesty feel of the bass guitar.
Yeah. And that just kind of caught you.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a bass guitar that my mum had, and I just picked it up and sort of taught myself to start with, just following through the tuition book.
Did you teach yourself violin as well, or
no? So I learnt violin classically.
Right. Okay.
And I worked my way through the grades with a teacher.
Cool. And then that was in school, I guess.
That was in school, yeah.
Nice. And then the bass you kind of was more self-taught. But I guess you were transferring the skills that you'd already learned on the violin across.
Yeah, so all of the notation skills I'd learnt on the violin, I could transfer across. I'd also had lessons in jazz piano.
Oh, nice.
So obviously I had the bass clef side of things sorted from that. And then it was really just a case of transitioning the sort of physical elements of where you put your fingers and some technique.
Yeah.
But obviously with Dad being a guitar player as well, he was able to show me a lot of technique. And then alongside that, sort of playing in ensembles at school, we got some guidance and help with that.
Yeah, it's amazing how just learning those basic reading skills, how easier it makes learning a second instrument, because you already can understand the kind of harmonic part of the learning, so you just need to fill in the gaps with the kind of technique, I guess, like you said.
Sure, it's like that. Part of learning music is learning how to read music. And once you can read, if you can read a book, for example, reading another book's quite easy.
Yeah.
And you can sort of apply the same thing to music. If you know the rhythms, you can just apply that to a new instrument. You're still holding a note for a certain length of time or trying to play a rhythm. It's just, like you say, the physical side of how to get that done.
Yeah, I think that's a great argument for learning to read score, because I know that is quite often a binding point for some students, because they want to play, especially for guitarists. I think it's a real binding point, because they just want to play guitar. They just want to play Green Day, and we're like, look, maybe you should learn a bit of this score stuff. And the thing is, if they learnt it, then it would mean that they're kind of opened up to any instrument that they then wanted to move on to. And I have had that happen with classical students in primary, always played classical and then went to secondary, and then they might have started bass, or they might have started piano or drums, but they were able to transfer their skills so easily that learning that new instrument, they had like a boost into it, like a step up to learning it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's the great thing about music, isn't it? Is like you don't have to just be a violinist or a piano player or a bass player. And like you say, as you get older, your tastes change. It might be that you used to love classical music and then you transition into jazz or rock, or you started off learning rock and you sort of develop and think, actually, jazz has got a lot to offer with some more interesting and different soundscapes that you don't get in rock music.
Yeah, which tends to be a fairly actual common progression for rock guitarists. They hit a point and they start tippling into jazz quite quickly. But yeah, having that backing is really useful. And I think if you learn piano, that's like the optimum instrument for transferring into other instruments, because you've just got that full breadth of knowledge when it comes to harmony and reading all the clefs. Well, not all, but treble and bass.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah. How long did you learn piano for long, or was it kind of like a fill-in just to fill out your theory side?
When I started senior school, I had the opportunity to start learning jazz piano there, and I did it for the first 3 years.
Who taught you that?
Simon Latache.
Okay, cool.
And he sort of like guided me through a lot of the theory and everything behind it, as well as the notation.
Yeah.
But having that, like you say, that knowledge of reading the bass clef, also reading the treble clef, even has like set me up well for being able to lead orchestras and ensembles. Just that fact of following two staves of music at the same time.
Yeah.
It introduces that idea of following more than one thing happening than just the melody at once.
Yeah, I'm so bad at multitasking. Like I think if I had learnt piano, my multitasking would be way better than it is at the minute. I mean, it's one of my big regrets is not learning piano more seriously. I mean, I can play basic piano, but being a bit more serious about it, I do kind of regret doing that when I was a bit younger. But I started a bit late anyway, so it kind of I had to go full steam ahead on one instrument. So what was your first performance then? You said you played with your dad in the like folk group. Was that like the first kind of performance thing you did, or did you do stuff on the violin before that, or was it later?
Well, starting off, I mean, obviously we were doing learning violin in school, and then you get your school concerts and chances to play little solos, maybe in the Christmas performance. You just play a little piece, and then building up from that. At primary school, we always had a big concert in October, and everyone was always encouraged to take part in that.
Was that like a specifically music concert as well?
That was a specifically music concert. So I went to Helen Village School to start with, and then I moved halfway through primary school to Truro Prep School.
Oh, cool.
And then I went on to Truro Senior School. One of the things that Truro School has always done is put on a concert in the Hall for Cornwall in the autumn term.
Yeah, they are really musical there, aren't they?
Yeah.
At that school, super musical. I mean, obviously CMST are based there. So just to add to the musical reputability, I think it's cool that they offer those opportunities. Did you ever find performing scary at a young age, or was it because your dad always did it? It was all right.
No, I was always very, very nervous with performing. I always feel quite self-conscious and sort of very aware of not wanting to make a mistake, and I suppose that fear of, you know, either letting the other people in the band down or the ensemble down, or just that sort of, you know, I've never been one to be the centre of attention. I'm quite happy to sort of take a back seat with things in that sense.
And that's funny, isn't it? Because you're now obviously in a duo, so it's pretty hard to escape the centre of attention.
Yeah, I mean, when you're the melody player in a duo, or even the accompanist in a duo, there is nowhere to hide.
No.
And I suppose in some ways that's one of the things I really enjoyed about playing the bass guitar.
Yeah.
Was although you've got such a fundamental part to play, you know, keeping the bass lines and structuring the harmony of a piece, and also working with the drummer to keep everyone in time, being part of the rhythm section. There is that element of just being able to sit back a little bit. You know, you're in the back row of the band, you're sort of forming the foundations for everything else, and you've got your melody players or singers playing on top, maybe taking more of the front sort of stage light.
It's definitely a confidence booster being able to do that, because then, like, you know, if you can feel comfortable being in that backing position, and then when someone comes up and they're like, "Oh, I really enjoyed that," it's like you get that little confidence boost. And I know I used to be so nervous, like so afraid of playing a wrong note, which now just baffles me. I'm like, there is no such thing as a wrong note, so I don't understand why I was so nervous of it. But I think it's just one of those irrational fears when you're a kid, isn't it? We do focus on notes being right or wrong, even if that isn't always the case. And yeah, I see your point. I mean, I play in a 3-piece a lot, and it's your rock equivalent to a 2-piece, I guess, in that there's not much room to hide when you've each got to fill like 2 other people's places. And yeah, it can be a bit daunting sometimes, and it is blatantly obvious when you make a wrong note.
Yeah, I suppose it's also that like perceived sense of either risk or exposure, because realistically, if you're playing bass in a jazz band, you are the only person that's playing the bass.
Yeah.
And there might be a whole section of saxes.
Yeah.
But what you maybe perceive as, I'm just a backline player, and it maybe just gives you that boost of confidence. But in actual fact, you know, if you or the drummer or the guitarist goes wrong or plays something wrong, it's really obvious.
Yeah. Especially in jazz, where the bass is like doing that movement role, isn't it? You know, it's kind of moving the band forward through the different chords. It's really, really obvious when it's not quite in the right place. But equally, you know, there's a bit more leeway in jazz. So it's a cool place to be when you're just starting out, I guess.
Yeah.
It's probably a good learning opportunity for a bass instrument.
Yeah, I think that one thing that goes with all instruments is actually playing a variety of styles.
Yeah.
And different genres of music, like, brings out the sort of great things about that genre and also the not so great things. Like, say, maybe jazz allows you to feel like you can be a little bit more experimental with the notes you play, or maybe it's slightly more forgiving. Maybe playing folk music gives you a feeling that, like, you can just really have fun. You know, a lot of folk music is designed to sort of be played to accompany dancing or dancing for social events, which are purely there just to have fun. And again, maybe that releases some inhibitions, or the fact that you play in a symphony orchestra, you're surrounded by 50, 60 other people. You definitely don't feel like if you make one little mistake or stop playing for just a few seconds that you're going to be heard.
Yeah. It's a good point. You know, and I said at the top that you've played through loads of genres and styles of music. it does make you more well-rounded as a musician doing that. And I know it's when you first start out, it's quite difficult to do that because your mind is very linear and focused on, you've got one or two songs that you'd really like to learn. But I think taking that step and expanding it is definitely a good bit of advice. I try and do it for a lot of my students, just suggest them something to listen to even sometimes. Just, you don't even have to play it, but just listening to a different genre of music can really open your eyes.
Yeah, and you might even surprise yourself, or it might be that opens up another opportunity that you just weren't expecting.
Yeah.
I'd always really liked playing, like I say, folk music and classical music. And I'd played sort of as I got older, into sort of late teens, and when I left school, playing a lot in the classical orchestras in Cornwall. But then that very quickly led to being asked to play in the pit.
Right, yeah.
For shows and stuff. So all of a sudden you're thrown into a completely new world between playing for operas down at the Minack Theatre, so I've got that sort of side of things, to playing things like playing for Legally Blonde. A completely opposite side of the sort of theatre spectrum.
Yeah.
Those experiences, they're just such great fun, and it's that having that variety. I suppose they always say variety's the spice of life, which sort of sounds cheesy, but having the variety in the music that you play really keeps your interest, and I suppose can always focus you into trying new things and making you practice things that maybe you wouldn't have chosen to yourself.
Yeah.
But it's all cumulative knowledge. You're getting a more rounded, better musician.
Yeah, and those musical theatre type shows as well, they are very rarely all the same kind of music. I know that there are a few which are, say Motown focused or whatever, but playing wise, they can diverge massively, can't they? I went and played the School of Rock musical in the pit, and I was playing electric guitar. So I was like blasting through all these electric guitar riffs. I was like, oh, cool. And then it just like cut, and it was like a pop ballad with like a upbeat like acoustic guitar riff, just like bang in the middle of the, sort of a Grease style piece right in the middle of the performance, and you were like, well, I didn't see that coming. Like, that just came out of nowhere. But like you say, it made it interesting. I wasn't just like thrashing out power chords the entire night. It kind of spiced it up, and it was a really nice song, actually. I came to really enjoy it, but I don't know if I'd have ever learnt it by itself. So yeah, that opportunity expanded my mind at that point, I guess.
Yeah, sure. And having that ability to adapt your playing to that style,
yeah,
that's sort of one of those things that producers or directors of the show are looking for. It's no good just having the best rock musician in the world to come and play the rock riffs, because at the same time they're going to have to switch it up and be able to go to acoustic styles, or maybe there'll be a jazz number in there as well.
Yeah.
And I think especially for the world of show playing, people are looking for really, really well-rounded musicians.
Yeah.
Especially maybe more at an amateur dramatic level and slightly above than a out and out, Broadway sort of level or West End level.
I think like the Amdram kind of side, they do tend to switch out a few songs, don't they? Try and be a bit more current, or try and play around with it a bit more. And that does mean that you are jumping genres a lot more. I played in like Grease as well, and that's pretty similar all the way through. I'm playing 1-3-5 bass lines for the majority of the songs in that show, but that's what you expect from Grease. And I know like Hairspray is super Motown-y when I played that. So you expect Motown riffs for most of the song. That's cool. There are a couple like slightly different ones, but for the most part, that's what you expect. But the dramatic ones, you might be playing Michael Jackson and then straight into Queen or Drake or something. It could just be absolutely anything, depending what the director's picked out.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're an aspiring musician and you're looking to be able to take music to the next level and do it professionally. There's so many different avenues and routes in that you can take. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, being really versatile is going to open up more opportunities than just following one really, really strict way in.
Yeah.
And a lot of music, and progressing as a musician or getting yourself well known, it's not necessarily just about how good you are.
No.
It's about the people that have heard you or who you know, or it's just like luck of the draw sometimes. A lot of the festivals that Jamie and I have been invited to as our duo, we've been invited to one festival off the back of another performance. It might have been that we were just playing a pub gig and it happened to be the festival organizer was there.
Yeah.
For example, Jamie and I got asked to play at Glastonbury a few years ago, and that came solely off the back of a support gig that we played in Bodmin for a band called Fairport Convention, which was a really massive gig anyway for such a prestigious folk band to be supporting them. So it was sort of a 3-step journey, because then that support gig had come out of playing for smaller gigs and festivals.
Yeah.
So we'd got recommended from a festival to support Fairport Convention. And then at that gig, there was an organiser at Glastonbury. And then he approached us afterwards and said, "Hey guys, I really liked your set. Would you come and play at Glastonbury for us?"
Yeah.
And we're sort of thinking, yeah, well, that'd be great, but, we're never going to hear from this guy again. And then, a few months later, here comes the email. "Would you guys like to come up? Here are the dates. This is the deal." And that's it. But had we not taken that opportunity to play for the support slot gig, we wouldn't have got the Glastonbury gig.
And probably even before then.
And if we hadn't played at the festival gig, we wouldn't have got in it. And there's so many occasions like that happen in your music career.
Yeah.
I suppose it's never turn anything down, isn't it? If you can.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that music has this weird meandering path, hence the name of this podcast, and it just leads to new steps. If you take a chance, you'll get opportunities arrive out of it. So it's always worth doing. Would you say that Glastonbury was your favourite performance you've ever done, or is there one that kind of sticks out at you? Or is it kind of all just so different that?
Do you know what? There's so many different performances that have done, and each of them have their own real sort of special moment. Yeah. For example, the Glastonbury gig, it was we were there playing on stage, and there's so many other high end headline acts going on around. And, a lot of the stuff going on at Glastonbury is dance music, rock, pop, lots of things like that. And to actually see people come to the stage and actually really, really dance around and just be having a great time. Yeah. You sort of it feels like a real win. You're sort of thinking, yeah, well, it's all very well that there's a headline act on the stage 2 down from us. But these people have actually decided to stay and listen to what we're doing, and they're dancing around, they're having a great time, and they haven't just passed us by. So, it's not... that sort of feels really reassuring as a musician, and that becomes really enjoyable, seeing that people are having such a great time in front of you.
Yeah, I think Glastonbury is really great for that. When I played there, we were a student band, we were it's a massive festival. Who's going to drop in and see, this little tiny band from Bath or whatever? Yeah, loads of people were there. It's people just turn up and they're yeah, we're ready. We want to hear what you've got. And it's so cool. Just so willing to listen. Yeah. And dance, like you said. And it's just, it is a great festival. No matter if you're a big or a small band.
Exactly. And people appreciate good music. And if they hear it, they'll get involved and they'll enjoy it. Yeah. You don't necessarily have to be a headline artist to have that enjoyment. And everyone started somewhere. On the whole, it's very rare that you just go from learning an instrument in school or at home to headline act at Glastonbury, all of these musicians, like they've done that middle stage as well.
Yeah. And even if you think they haven't, you know, like, because there's some famous bands where they were famous very young or whatever it might be, or even like solo acts, you know, especially with YouTube at the minute, people like Justin Bieber. The thing is, like, they did that work. They've just done it in a different way. You know, they did all that early stuff online, and it was still a performance, and they still had to work hard because there's still 20 other musicians, or probably thousands of other musicians, doing the exact same thing. So they've obviously done something in order to get that fame. It doesn't just spot, you know, I record a cover of Justin Bieber and now I'm famous. There's steps through that path and obstacles which need to be overcome.
Of course, when you got somebody like that who's a solo artist or singer, he's got session musicians that travel around with him.
Yep.
It might be that when he plays an LA show, he's got different musicians to when he plays a European show. And there's a lot to be said about being that session musician that's in that band.
Yeah. They've been picked by him. Like, a lot of people will think that, you know, his reps or whatever just picked out a band for him. That's not how that works. Even if you perceive someone as not a musician, they want to pick the guys that they go on stage with every night. They want to pick the guys that they can get on with. They're not going to go, you're the best musician in the world, so you're in my band. That's not like that. Two-way street.
No, I mean, you couldn't have that anyway, because part of your performance is your interaction with the other musicians on stage.
Yeah.
And if you're playing with people that you can bounce off, it makes for that, you know, much of a better performance. It's one of the big performing skills, isn't it? It's not just about standing there playing the tunes or singing the songs absolutely amazingly. If we want to hear that, we'll just stick YouTube on or put our favourite CD in the player. It's that extra elevated thing, isn't it? It's seeing the interaction between the musicians, that sort of live, spontaneous result that comes of it. And if you haven't got that sort of rapport with people, it's not going to happen. It's going to feel very, very clinical and not that sort of great thing that music gives us.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, it's something that you need to develop and practice in itself, isn't it? You know, be that by playing in bands, or be that something that you do by yourself, creating your identity. Is something you need to practice. And kind of on that same thought process, do you still practice a lot now, or are you kind of doing that as part of your playing? Probably not this year, but in general.
So sorry, do you mean, do I still like practice just my sort of technique and individual side of things, or is it more of a practice of performance?
Well, just kind of anything really. Do you still, now as a more developed musician, what part do you practice? Do you practice your kind of live performance thing, or is it more of a concerned focus on your instrument?
So do you know, actually, the more recently, and even, you know, before this year, my sort of out and out sort of sat down focused practice has been quite reduced compared to when I was sort of learning at school.
Yeah.
But one thing that I have really tried to do is really sort of focus in on that time. We've all got really busy lives, and sort of like being a teacher as well, there's all the extra things that come with it. Maybe you're out doing a school concert in the evening, or you're preparing for a gig, or you're just doing admin.
Yeah.
So actually being able to sit down and do 2 or 3 hours practice in the evening is a lot of the time really, really unachievable.
Yeah.
But one thing that I will really always try and do is practice smart.
Yes.
I'm sure we probably come back to this later, but
let's go on to it now.
Just like making use of that time. If you've got half an hour, you know, how can you really, really utilize that half an hour?
Yeah.
It's no good just playing through the piece. Maybe all I'll do is just focus on a bowing technique that I'm trying to do, or like a little ornament that I'm trying to fit into a piece. And then sort of everything that I've learned up until this point, that cumulative knowledge, that sort of gets me to the stage where I can just play through the piece. I'm just wanting to like really, really hone it and get it sounding great. So instead of just playing the melody loads of times over and over and over again, yeah, I can already sort of do that. And what I want to do is look at how I can make it more interesting, how I can put an emphasis on that note. Yeah. And certainly if I'm learning a new piece, I'm listening to it all the time. You know, I've got it in the car. I do a lot of driving between schools, and if I'm learning stuff, I'm just doing listening all the time. And while I'm listening to the piece, I'm not just listening to it in the background. I'm sort of like really trying to pick out things from it,
like kind of active listening.
Yeah,
like listening to all the parts and trying to figure out where your bit sits within those parts.
Yeah, or if there's like a passage of quavers, where's the emphasis coming? Is it coming at the start of every four, or is it becoming more interesting, like being on the second, fourth, fifth, and seventh quaver?
Yeah.
Instead of just the first of each group of four, and things like that then I can, when I get home and have got a bit of chance to practice, I can start to try and practice that, I'm trying to put that emphasis in a different place.
Yeah, it's kind of being like more specific within your practice, isn't it? Really being like, this little bit needs to be practiced. And I actually think that if you're able to do that, then you're probably hour of practice a week, if it's really refined, could be just as useful as 5 or 6 hours of unrefined practice. If you're really, really focusing on that micro detail or that specific thing in a very finite way, then you're probably pushing your playing up, but in kind of chunks rather than pushing it up on a slow, gradual incline.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we develop as we get more used to practicing and getting into that mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a thing as well with the development. I mean, obviously at a very early stage of learning an instrument, if you're grade 1 or 2, you're not going to be like listening to the little nuances of what's going on. No. You're going to be happy if you've identified that as, oh yeah, that note's in E and I play it like this, and I've managed to keep my bow straight on the violin and I've made a great sound.
Yeah, that's it.
But that's where practice becomes has to evolve as you progress as a musician.
Yeah. If it doesn't evolve, like I said, it's a very gradual incline. I think especially when you're looking at more advanced techniques, things that take smaller movements of your hand or quicker movements, you have to be so focused to get that going. And is that a tip you try and tell your students, to be a bit more focused in their practice regime? Or
yeah, I mean, I'm always sort of trying to say to students, practice smart.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people always, or my students always say to me, oh, I didn't have a chance to practice this week, or I just don't have time to practice. Yeah. I always try to say to them, just think about actually how much time you do have. You've got so many minutes in an hour, so many hours in a day. Take away the ones you can't do, but you'd be surprised. Yeah, even if it's just 5 minutes.
Yeah, I actually think that 5 minutes a day is far more productive than an hour a week.
Yeah,
because you're going to pick up the guitar or the violin or whatever you might have, and you're going to focus on what you're going to play, and then you're going to be like, oh, I've only got a minute left. I better just look at this bit before I stop. And it kind of forces you, like you say, into that smart learning, that smart practicing regime, in that you are limited on time. So you can't just sit there jamming along to stuff.
If you've sat down and you've played the melody 3-4 times and you've made the same mistake every single time, and then you think, oh, that's 20 minutes up, I'm done practicing. You haven't progressed. You haven't really got any better. You've maybe got a bit more familiar with the tune, but you've also just got more familiar with the mistakes that you always have been making.
Yeah.
So I always try and get people to sort of, what is that bit that's really hard? Set an achievable goal. If it's, in a piece, there's probably actually only 1 or 2 lines in the piece, or maybe even 1 or 2 bars that are really tripping you up.
Yeah.
And instead of, it's a sort of good feeling thing, isn't it? If you play through the piece, oh, I always get that bit wrong. Play it again. Oh, I always get that bit wrong.
Yeah.
Third time, got it wrong. You've not come away from that practice really feeling great. You've just thought, oh, I just got that bit wrong 3 times.
And that's it, isn't it?
So then go back to those 2 bars and just say, right, tonight's practice session, I'm going to do 5 minutes on that 1 bar.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to try and make it better. Either I'm just going to try and get the tuning really good, or maybe I just need to try and build the tempo up.
Yeah.
and you can sort of really see your progress. You can get to the end of your practice session and think, if you were practicing with a metronome, for example, I was able to start my practice session and I could play it at 60 BPM. By the end, I can play it at 110.
Yeah. And that's it.
It's like really tangible progress, isn't it, that you can see?
Yeah, and especially with that tempo increase, you've got numbers to prove that you can do it. Like you said, sometimes it's literally only one or two notes that might be tripping you up. It might not even be a full bar or a full section, but if you're able to recognize that little part that's catching you, you can defeat it quite quickly, can't you? You can master that pretty swiftly as long as you're able to recognize the bit that's getting you. And I think that takes a bit of practice as well.
Yeah, and I suppose that's something I'm trying to guide students towards in their lessons.
Yeah.
Is maybe being able to pick out those bits that are a problem to them.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, really going into depth of how to get around it, but even just the identification of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it is a speed thing, isn't it? It's just a case of you've got to get your fingers familiar with it, and learning how to practice is something that, maybe not everyone's taught how to do in their lesson. We maybe spend so much time thinking about this is how you play this note, or this is how you should hold the bow or the plectrum. This is the correct position for your wrist. You should be sitting up straight.
Yeah.
All those things are really important. But if you've done all that in your lesson and then your teacher says, oh, now go and practice. It's like, well, what do I do? I think I'm sitting straight. I think I'm doing this.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to get that bar faster, step by step, that's also a really important thing.
I only ever let my students pass a song when they think it's ready. I don't think I've ever told a student that a song is complete, ever. Because I think you need to be able to recognize if it's right, if it's done. And you get the odd student who's like, I'm done with this one, it's done. But they don't. They know that it's wrong, and they'll come back with it later. It's quite funny, really. But like you say, that learning a practice technique is a whole skill in itself, and maybe that's something we do need to look into more. But we're getting near the end of this episode now, and I always like to finish off this with just a really easy question, or kind of a question that takes us back to the beginning in a way. And that is, how does music affect your adult life now? So we talked about when you were young and your dad was playing guitar, but obviously you've grown up now and you need to create the musical part of your life. And so how is it affecting you on the day to day?
Every single day I listen to music, and it really helps change my mood. It might be, it's been a hard day teaching, or things have gone wrong, something's been really frustrating, and it's nice just to be able to sit down and just really relax, and music definitely helps me to relax. But also on the flip side, I really enjoy surfing, I really enjoy motorbiking and mountain biking, and sometimes it's just that sort of thing to get you fired up a little bit. And I'm maybe listening to a completely different genre of music there, but there's a reason why action packed videos have got energetic music. And if you're listening to that sort of thing before you go and do that activity, it can really sort of help get you in the right mindset and frame of mind.
Kind of focuses you in a bit, doesn't it? It gets your brain running at the same speed as everything else is running.
Yeah, exactly. Or if I'm on the way to a gig and I just really want to start getting rid of those butterflies, feeling a little bit nervous, I'll put on some music and just enjoy listening to it. And it helps to relax you and get you in that right frame of mind.
That's awesome.
But also, aside from the everyday listening side of things, I mean, a lot of my friends I wouldn't have met if it hadn't been through music.
Yeah. It's a connector, isn't it? It connects you with people. Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously my colleagues at the music service, but aside from that, I've got friends that I've met at festivals. Maybe even people from different countries or parts of the UK. I've got loads of really great friends in the Isle of Man and Scotland and Wales that I wouldn't have met had it not been for those festivals. And it's, it's really nice to get that social side of it. Or even just, you've gone down to the pub, you've played a gig, and maybe somebody's come up to you and chatted afterwards, and you get to know them. can be quite hard as an adult, like getting those avenues of new friendship.
Yeah, no, it can. And I kind of think that when you're like a child or in school, you make friends with people because you're around them all the time. But it doesn't mean that necessarily that your ideologies or your interests are the same. When you're interested in music and someone else is interested in music, you've instantaneously got an alignment there. Whether they're interested in rock and you're interested in jazz, it kind of doesn't really matter. You both love music, and it's just that little bit of alignment that makes you approachable and able to befriend people more easily, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's just that first initial icebreaker just to get you there. And also, like you say, by nature of it, it's almost all like it filters out the people that you're maybe not as compatible with, and just immediately presents you with those people that you might be potentially able to make good friends with. But as well, it's just out and out good fun. Playing an instrument, it's just great, isn't it? You get that sense of achievement.
No matter what your mood is, you can just play something that gets you out of your headspace. You can just kind of, like you said about putting the song on the radio or on the CD or whatever. It's the same idea. If you pick up your instrument and you play a specific kind of song, it gets you into that same headspace.
I suppose on top of all of that, how does it affect me as an adult? Music is my sole source of income as well.
Yeah.
And it's so good to be able to, everyone always says, I wish I could do what I really feel passionate about as a job. And, it's got its highs and lows being a musician. We all know that. But at the end of the day, it's really amazing to think that all that hard work that I've put in through school and practice, countless hours of practice and progression is actually, really paying off. And it's, that's how I make a living.
If that's your goal, to be able to achieve it is just the best. And I know I've had the same luck in that I get to do the same things. And I am really grateful for music for presenting those opportunities for me. But we are at the end anyway. I hope that whoever is listening to this podcast has grabbed some inspiration from this. Maybe they'll go out and practice and start focusing on those micro things that we talked about, or maybe even reducing their practice down so that it's really concise. Remember, just as Stuart pointed out, every path leads to a goal eventually. So why not take them all? And until next time, bye.
Cheers.